First, a word of thanks to my good friend Tucker Carlson, the world's preeminent broadcaster, a man who regularly broadcasts not to millions, as we do here, but to hundreds of millions of people. This titan of television and broadcasting interviewed me just earlier this week, and it was aired on Friday. And the response has been absolutely phenomenal. And many thanks, and I'm very touched that so many of you were moved by the story that I had to open up with about the fact that we are now in the lands of Genghis Khan. The number of people who wrote to me with medical tips and suggestions and offers of their accommodation in Ireland and Spain, in all kinds of places, really genuinely moved me. This interview had been in the works for quite some time, since my good friend Tara Reid introduced Tucker and I and pushed for me to be interviewed by him, and I'm grateful, Tara, always, forever, for that. The fact that we now have an audience even larger than it was, we'll see in the next few days just how much larger, is due to the exposure given by Tucker Carlson and his interview. If you haven't watched it yet, I commend it to you. It's only 38 minutes. Most people wished it had gone on for longer. Some ask for a round two, and I'm ready for both of those. But the main takeaway from the issue that we were discussing, or the issues that we were discussing, is the cross-dressing in the political arena. I take no pleasure in saying that the Your Party conference in Liverpool was a circus. Certainly there were plenty of clowns, one or two big beasts, but the most ridiculous ending possible was contrived. Jeremy Corbyn is the most significant socialist political leader in Britain in the 21st century. The great man Tony Benn taught he and I everything that we know. Jeremy Corbyn laboured mightily to produce a party with all around him squalling and squawking, people strolling on to the conference stage and informing us of their personal pronouns and their sexual proclivities and their demands for trans liberation and all the 57 varieties of ultra-left extremism in Britain. All did their best to wreck Jeremy's conference. Of course, they wouldn't put it that way. That's Joseph behind me. We may talk about him later. Joseph, with the multicoloured headwear, was just one of those extremist cranks, comic singers, who did everything that they could to spoil the launch of what might have been a socialist party that could have gone somewhere, could have been a contender. Whether it will now be is obviously a matter for the future, and personally I hope that it will be. Now that they are allowing dual membership, I'm sure that members of my own party will join it, although maybe the dual party whitelist will only include parties way to the left of us. We'll see. But I feel very sorry that my friend of more than 40 years, Jeremy Corbyn, will now have to retire to his allotment, having prepared the ground for the launch of this party. The members of the party voted narrowly, almost a toss of the coin, that he would not be the leader, would not have the chance to even stand to be the leader. And that's a tragedy. The members have retired their best and greatest asset. The country is not ready for Joseph of the multicoloured headgear. The country is not ready for a collective leadership which will not include either Mr. Corbyn or Zara Sultana. By rule, they will not be permitted to run, to be a part of the collective leadership. They have retired their greatest asset. They have dropped the pilot, the most recognisable man on the left in British politics, I say modestly. The man who raised the Labour vote in 2017 by the highest number of votes ever recorded since 1945, and the Labour landslide victory of Clement Attlee. The man who packed them in, chanting his name in auditoria all over this country, will not now be the leader of the Jeremy Corbyn party. It's going to be called Your Party, which was, I suppose, the best of a rather limited collection of names that were offered to the membership. I'm still waiting for the result on the vote on whether members of Parliament have to accept the average worker's wage, long-standing far-left demand. If it has passed, I predict that until the next general election at least, they will not have many members of Parliament standing in their colours, speaking from the floor of the House in their name. If you tell a member of Parliament that he's going to have to cut his wages by 2/3, I suspect you'll get a rude reply from most of them. In fact, 2 of the 5 have already left and may well be followed by others. But I'm not concerned about them. I'm not concerned about the wages of members of Parliament, for I'm not one and will not be one again. I'm concerned, though, for Jeremy Corbyn. I have no idea what he's going to do next, but I wish him every success and happiness in the rest of his life. Not that I owe him anything, quite the contrary, but I nonetheless sincerely mean what I have just said. It is the 11th hour. It's the 11th hour in Venezuela. The mass of the Venezuelan people are now armed. They're armed with small arms. They're armed with anti-tank weapons. They're armed with shoulder-borne anti-aircraft weapons. They are armed with artillery. They are armed with RPGs. They are armed with grenades. They are armed with every piece of weaponry that you would need in a guerrilla war, which may very well begin even in the course of this program. As someone famously said, I think Garland Nixon, my good friend from the United States, Venezuela is jungles and mountains with jungles, as well, of course, as the narrow alleyways of Caracas and other towns and cities in Venezuela. It has millions of people now under arms, and they are waiting for a Yankee invasion, which Donald Trump, the peace president, the no new wars president, the man who wanted to talk and negotiate on 8 or was it 12 different wars, the man that was ready to talk to the little rocket man, Kim Jong-un, the man that was able to negotiate with the Ansar Allah armed forces in the Yemen, the man that was ready to talk to Iran, is not ready to talk to President Nicolas Maduro. He says he is, but only to tell him that it would be better if he now left the country before President Trump was forced to kill him. The pretext for this imminent invasion of Venezuela is, as I said in my introduction, the thinnest since Adolf Hitler claimed that he was invading Poland because Poland had invaded him. And he had even strewn some corpses on the German border, claiming that they were the victims of Polish aggression. Everybody laughed at that pretext then, but they're not laughing now, because it was the precursor to a global world war, World War II, which left almost 100 million dead and overshadowed the world for most of the time that I have been alive. What's overshadowing us now is the danger not of World War II, but of World War III, which of course will leave no survivors at all. No one will have their lives shadowed by the outcome of World War III. Everyone will be dead. There will be some who will have purchased some subterranean nuclear shelter, but it will not have been worth the money, worth the trouble. Because even if you ever emerged from it, you would emerge to a nuclear winter which will blight all life for all time on the planet Earth. I'm not exaggerating about that, though it seems to me sometimes that people think I am. Well, if I tell you that Venezuela may well have acquired a nuclear weapon in the course of these months that Donald Trump has been threatening it, you'd realize just how dangerous and how close the world would then be, if that turned out to be the case, would then be to a nuclear exchange in the Americas. Russia is a close ally of Venezuela. So is China. So is Iran. And so is the DPRK, North Korea. And it is reported by sources that the DPRK have provided President Maduro and the legitimate government of Venezuela with a nuclear weapon which they may use in defense of their country if Donald Trump invades it. Now, I have no way of knowing the veracity of that story, but I do, of course, know that if they have such a weapon, Venezuela would be entirely legally entitled to use it. Donald Trump's pretext for invading a sovereign country, violating for weeks, if not months, the sovereign waters of that country, illegally declaring a no-fly zone over that country, telling all aircraft not to fly, beginning a series of terrorist attacks against the infrastructure of Venezuela, and openly from the Oval Office, threatening to invade Venezuela, gives Venezuela the absolute right of self-defense with any means necessary. Do people understand that? Do they understand that Venezuela will fight, and that they will fight for years, long after Donald Trump and the Nobel Peace Prize President Machado is installed in the Miraflores? Believe me, the Venezuelans will fight, and their children will fight, and their children will fight, because these are the people of Simón Bolivar. They did not seek to unite Latin America. They did not drive out the Spanish colonizer so that a Yankee colonizer could take their place, so that their oil, their gold, their minerals, their precious things, their precious land and waters can be exploited by Donald Trump's cronies. Are you crazy? You must be, if you think that this is not going to turn into a Latin Vietnam. I've been watching a lot of movies about Vietnam this week. It's true that the United States was able to deal devastating violence on Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos. They were, from the sky, well able to eviscerate millions of human beings, to soak the jungles of Vietnam with chemical weapons and napalm, setting the jungles alight and the deforestation and the birth defects caused by these chemical weapons still visible in the maternity wards of Vietnam today. It's true. The United States knocked hell out of Vietnam, but Vietnam prevailed. And the United States Armed Forces, and you cannot conquer a country without boots on the ground, suffered 58,000 dead Yankees in Vietnam, hundreds of thousands of wounded physically and mentally, millions of crimes and suicides committed over the rest of the lives of the people who never recovered from being a U.S. soldier in Vietnam. Prepare yourselves for all of that again. I promise you, Donald, I promise you that. Now, the one good thing you could say about Donald Trump, he's definitely trying to end the war in Ukraine. I know there are people who don't believe him. I know there are people who don't like me believing him, but I happen to believe him. For whatever reason, I have no idea what the genuine reason would be, but I am persuaded that Trump is seeking to bring about the end of the Ukraine war. He'll try and do it as much in his own interest as he possibly can. He'll try and do it to, I don't know, palliate the concerns of some in his own party, Miss Linda Graham, for example. He'll try and find face-saving formulae to wrap up what will be nonetheless seen across the rest of the world as a monumental victory for the people of the Russian Federation, for the people of the former republics of the Donbass, for the armed forces of the Russian Federation, for the workers on the home front of the Russian Federation, and for those people who stood up when things were tough and declared, as I did on Tucker Carlson and do again now, I do not want to go to war with Russia. The Ukraine war is over. Stop game playing, cosplaying. Stop it before our people get even more hurt than they've already been. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.